coming up on Wings of Inspired Business.
If we close our eyes and think back to when we were 7 years old, some 7-year-olds, watch their parents fight a lot, right? And if they watch their parents fight, or if they watch their parents go through a divorce, sometimes a little kid might think, oh my gosh, if I could be the peacekeeper, everything will be okay. And what that starts in that little kid's brain is, I have to behave a certain way to get what I want. And almost always for an entrepreneur, the problem they're solving goes back to what they experienced as a kid that built a superpower in them. And that superpower is an incredible skill that they've built then from that trauma patterning that they experienced as a kid. So almost all entrepreneurs that I've ever worked with, what they're doing in their business is almost directly related to what they experienced as a child that was unstable or that they couldn't control.
When you look at the world around you, it starts to make sense when you realize the world is pretty much run by toddlers. Seriously, the traumas, large and small, imprinted on us from birth to age 7 are subconscious drivers that power what we do, how we react, and even as entrepreneurs, the types of businesses we create. Annie Yatch is a counterterrorism expert turned executive coach who helps entrepreneurs break through all those blocks and limiting patterns so we can achieve what we really want. Hi, I'm your host, Melinda Wittstock, and I hope all is well with you today. Your business is humming, you're feeling great, and you're taking time to appreciate all your gifts, learnings, and successes. Entrepreneurship is a journey, and it pays to take a moment and just enjoy the present moment. Today on the show, we're talking about all the subconscious blocks formed in our childhood and how they drive your entrepreneurial journey for good and bad. If you're new here, this is the place where we share the inspiring entrepreneurial journeys, epiphanies, and practical advice from successful female founders, so you have everything you need at your fingertips to build the business and life of your dreams. I believe in paying it forward, and as a 5-time serial entrepreneur, I started this podcast to catalyze an ecosystem where women entrepreneurs mentor, promote, buy from, and invest in each other. Because together we're stronger, and we all soar higher when we fly together and lift as we climb. If you've been listening to any of the past 979 episodes, please help us get the word out about the show. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell your friends and colleagues, share the episode, and leave a quick 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Today, we meet an inspiring entrepreneur and coach who began her career as a counterterrorism expert. Annie Yatch learned a lot about human behavior analyzing global threats. And there's a fascinating overlap when we think about war and diplomacy with the hidden patterns that block CEOs and founders from reaching new heights. Annie is the founder and CEO of Reinvention XO, and today she shares how the subconscious beliefs formed in childhood, especially for those who grew up in unstable environments, can both power our entrepreneurial drive and also secretly cap our success, happiness, and even revenue. We get deep into how all these invisible scripts shape our teams and cultures and why overcoming them requires more than just logic. It requires deep emotional and subconscious work. Annie unpacks her unique approach, blending counterintelligence skills with practices like Huna and Ho'oponopono to help leaders unravel old trauma and step into true authority, creating healthier businesses and relationships along the way. Annie works with founders, CEOs, and high-performing leaders who've mastered strategy and execution, but still feel capped, exhausted, or disconnected. So whether you're hitting a plateau, stuck in people-pleasing or burnout, or just curious how elite Navy SEAL mindsets can apply to your business, listen on. We're putting on our wings with the inspiring Annie Yatch. Annie, welcome to Wings.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so intrigued with your counterterrorism background and what counterterrorism tells you about the blind spots and roadblocks that CEOs and founders have.
Well, it's so wild. I really wanted to, protect the country, make the world a safer place, make sure that families everywhere could feel like they had stability. And so I originally went to Georgetown because I wanted to learn about international law and about counterinsurgency, counterterrorism. And, back then it was around the time of the Pentagon being hit, 9/11. And it really, because I lived in the DC area, I had so many friends who had lost family members or had gone through so much because of that, that it really just honed my desire to make the world a better place. So if you look at it that way, counterterrorism isn't that far from transformation, but it definitely seems like a big leap or a big jump.
Right. And so, specifically in analyzing threats, that's something that a CEO, certainly a paranoid entrepreneur, founder, needs to be doing, I guess, all the time. I guess in a competitive landscape, I mean, there's that, like what's external to us, but there's also kind of internal threats, like our own mindset or
All the
whatever.
time. All the time. Yes, that is so true. We became entrepreneurial or we became CEOs because we had a great ability to solve and fix problems. And we were really good usually at putting out fires in businesses. But what that actually told me was that there is a way of thinking that was developed from when we were younger that caused us to want to do those things. And often, I always tell people, I'm like, it's not really you running the business. It's not your adult self. It's actually the little 7-year-old self that decided something was true that got in a pattern that it repeats over and over again. So it sounds like it wouldn't be something that would fit, counterintelligence or counterterrorism. Assessing behavior and assessing the patterns, that's really what got me even more intrigued on how I could assess the behavior pattern and the thought pattern of CEOs to get them out of their own way and to show them what they can't see. And that's sort of where I ended up going in business.
I think it's so true that a bunch of toddlers are running the world generally, right?
Yep.
And so the person who is a natural founder, entrepreneur, you create a business because you see a problem, you want to solve it. So there was something going on in your life as a child that wired you
Yes.
that way. So tell me a little
Yes.
bit more about that. What are some of the things? What are some of the patterns that you've seen?
So it could be something so simple as, if we close our eyes and think back to when we were 7 years old, some 7-year-olds, watch their parents fight a lot, right? And if they watch their parents fight, or if they watch their parents go through a divorce, sometimes a little kid might think, oh my gosh, if I could be the peacekeeper, everything will be okay. If I act really happy in this scenario, everything will be okay. If I can just be this way, I can manage the conflict of my parents. And what that starts in that little kid's brain is, I have to behave a certain way to get what I want. And almost always for an entrepreneur, the problem they're solving goes back to what they experienced as a kid that built a superpower in them. And that superpower is an incredible skill that they've built then from that trauma patterning that they experienced as a kid. So almost all entrepreneurs that I've ever worked with, what they're doing in their business is almost directly related to what they experienced as a child that was unstable or that they couldn't control.
So people who grew up in unstable environments are more likely to become entrepreneurs.
100%. 100%. Yes. Unstable emotionally or physically environments. Yes.
Okay, so that gives so much proof to the joke I make on this podcast a lot that if you want therapy, just become an entrepreneur because it's going to
100%.
confront you with all the stuff
Yes.
that you haven't healed in your own life.
I 100% agree with that. That is so refreshing to hear you say it because it's 100% true. Like if you want to go through some of the biggest crucible acts of growth, it is entrepreneurship or your relationships.
It's so true. My whole entrepreneurial journey as a serial entrepreneur completely bears this out. Like what you just described. If I think of my life as a child with two parents who, oh my God, I mean, they're like opera characters in terms of their inability to understand each other or communicate. And one of the first things it did was turn me into a journalist, but also an entrepreneur around media and technology and around connecting people and around solving things like the fake news problem. Like the
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it, when you reflect now? Because it's like if you were around parents that literally could not understand, could not communicate, then you become a journalist because you're like, I have to make sure the world communicates more effectively. I have to make sure that people can understand what's going on. It makes perfect sense.
that is so interesting. And so when you're taking founders through this, so you're working with founders and CEOs, and everybody gets to these plateaus in their business, or they have sometimes
Yes.
repeating patterns. Yeah, what we call these roadblocks, say, when you progress as far as you can, but then something's blocking you. Tell me a little bit about your process and how you
Sure.
help them identify that. And also, but the problem is what made them an entrepreneur to begin with. So, like, part of that, I guess, is good, right?
Yep.
But
So
part of it's
that's true.
not. So, yeah.
So there's definitely a part of it that is good, right? Which is the skill set that's been developed over time, right? So whenever an entrepreneur has something that happens when they're young, and I say that trauma, people don't like the word trauma, but I basically say that trauma is a perceived loss of control. If at any point in our lives we have a perceived loss of control, it's going to cause a new pattern to form in our brain. We're going to create some truth that we think is real that we're then going to live by, even if it's not necessarily real and accurate. So, the process that I walk people through, typically the first time I meet someone or the first time they sign up to work with me, we will look at the lowest point of their life and then the highest point of their life so that I can start to see the patterns that happen between the two. Now, most people will be like, well, there are no patterns. My low point was like one extreme, my high point was the other extreme. But there's a pattern in the language of what they speak and what they say between those 2 points that show me the root cause of what has been holding them back. And for most entrepreneurs, right, they'll drive towards a revenue number and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to drive towards 2 million. They get to 2 million and for some reason they can't get over 2 million or to 5 million or 10 million or 60 million, whatever that number is. And they'll get stuck, and they almost always get stuck because of the pattern that they cannot see. So it's my job to make sure that they see the pattern that's been holding them back their whole lives in the very first hour of working with me. And then we work to unravel that and disconnect it from all the stories that they've built, sort of like that scaffold in their brain that makes that one root pattern or one root story true. So we have to work on what is the root pattern. And then how do we disable that root pattern from driving them all the time? We don't want it to be something that drives them. We want it to be a skill that they've developed that they can pick and choose when they use for competitive advantage, but not to be something that's driving 97% of their subconscious thought pattern, if that makes sense.
Right. So, is the conscious realization of the pattern enough? Because you can have these patterns, you can be really aware of them, but you can still sort of be stuck in them. Like what's your process and how you actually do that? 'Cause it's easier
Yes.
said than done.
It is, most people, they always say that awareness is the first piece, right? So if you can't see the pattern, you can't change it, which is 100% accurate. So a lot of people, if they do their first call with me, they'll have this massive awareness, huge breakthrough, and they'll be like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. But then that's where the work kicks in, right? Because when I always record that first call, because when a person leaves that call, they will forget 50% of what we talk about because their subconscious brain does not want them to remember. Because if you remember, you would immediately and forever change your life. And so what then we have to start doing is looking at what are all the thought patterns and the emotions attached to that root trauma pattern, and how do we release those one after another so your subconscious is not running 11 million data points every second on those thoughts and those emotions. So that's really where my methodology starts is we've got to identify the root. Once we identify the root, we're going to start releasing all the negative emotions and all the negative thought patterns. And we have to search for those thought patterns, right? Because it's not something that you would naturally think, right? It's much deeper than what you've been telling yourself.
Right. So, how do you release them?
Well, thankfully, I was introduced to this really incredible process. And, I have a lot of methodologies that I developed on my own, but there is a process that is the fastest thing I've ever found to release these negative thought patterns and negative emotions out of the system. It goes back to an ancient Hawaiian practice that has 189 years of generational lineage. And that's something that I've been trained in over the past 4 years.
Is that
So I bring that one.
Ho'oponopono?
And no, Ho'oponopono is a part of it, but it's called Huna, Huna. And I've been training in that in addition to, as somebody who coaches, I always like to be learning the next and greatest, quickest methodology to move people because as entrepreneurs, we just don't have time for a lot of this unless it's fast, focused, and very streamlined. So this is the thing that I found about 7 years ago that really changed the game for a lot of my clients.
And so, tell me about Huna. How does it work?
So the basics of Huna, a lot of it, it sounds like Harry Potter's School of Wizardry, right? Like it basically is using the elements and the energy of the elements to move energy out and through the body. And it can be anything from light energy that you're moving it through to air, fire, water, earth. And so they use all the elements to basically help the body release things at a very deep subconscious level. So just like NLP or some of the timeline therapy processes that are out there, this works. I just find it works a lot quicker than when you try to logic someone through something, because as you know, emotion in the body isn't something that you can logic out. And most entrepreneurs are very deep logic thinkers. And so they're like, well, I've thought about this for hours and I've thought about this for years, but you can't logic or algorithm a way to release emotion from the body. And the emotional component is one of the most important pieces in releasing a trauma pattern. So when you're looking at the trauma pattern, you want to release it emotionally. You want to release it in and out of the body. You want to release it neurochemically, which is you want to change the way the brain produces dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin in order to up level the thinking to a new neural pathway. And then you also want to make sure that you address it intellectually. So the intellectual piece is only one aspect of a four-pronged approach to releasing trauma.
Right. So that makes sense because there's something where our subconscious is tricking us into thinking that we're winning or we have some sort of psychological safety in
Correct.
repeating these old patterns. So we get attached to them, even if we don't want to be. Like
Exactly.
there's sort of a familiarity. So this is all really deep rewiring of the
It
brain.
is deep rewiring, yes. And thankfully I can see patterns so quickly in people that typically, in a 30-minute session, we can dial in, what's really going on. And most people have never had the chance to have that be reflected. And so you could be stuck in a process from when you were 7 years old, replaying it out in different contexts for 30 years. And suddenly you have one interaction where you can finally see it, we release it, and people will tell me, they're like, the next day I woke up and my behavior was different. I didn't naturally go to the same behavior that I used to repeat over and over again. So the deep subconscious pattern is really what we're targeting with the work that I do with Huna. And
That's so interesting. So how long does this process usually take? And what are some of the before and afters?
Well, what I try to do with clients is I try to make it a pretty quick process, right? Because I know as entrepreneurs, we don't have a ton of time to do all this personal reflective work. But if I can give a bunch of tools to the person over typically a 6-month to a year-long process, then they leave as almost completely different people who are generating a ton more in revenue. So what I've seen, people go from I can't make more than $1 million to then launching their company to IPO status, right? I've seen people who are making the same $9 million mistake over and over again, stop doing that and generate 15 million in consistent, sustainable revenue. I've seen people who even come in at, I'm making 300 grand. I'm just launching my business and I'm looking to take it over $1 million, go from 300 grand to 2 million, right? Every person has their own revenue ceiling that is tied to their subconscious pattern. And if I can help them resolve the subconscious pattern, they're almost always going to be happier, do better in their relationships, and make more money because now they're able to see things that in the past would have been gaps that they would have naturally fallen into because they weren't aware that they were doing the same pattern over and over again.
It's so interesting that this often expresses itself in currency, in money, in terms of what your set point. Is that just tied to how we perceive our own value?
Yes, 100%. Or sometimes it can even be tied to, as strange as this sounds, to the relation you have with your parents and the amount of money your parents created. So sometimes, like one gentleman I worked with, his father had only ever made $2 million. And when his father died when he was 15, it was so shocking to his system that he internalized the concept that he will only ever make the same amount of money his dad made. And so every time he'd start to almost approach going over the 2 million mark, he would get horribly, horribly ill and would have to be admitted into a hospital. This happened for years and nobody could figure out what was going on. When he came to me, he's like, I know I can make more than 2 million. I don't know how to do this. He's like, but every time I get close, I get horribly ill. What do you think is happening? So we started diving into his subconscious and we discovered that as a 15-year-old boy, he decided, not consciously, but subconsciously, that he could never make more money than his dad or he would die.
Oh my God.
So that was the story that had been running him at 11 million data points of his subconscious for 30 years. And the second we unraveled that story and helped him to work on those subconscious programs, he took his company to IPO status. So that's where I get so excited because it doesn't matter what your revenue ceiling is. If you do the work, you always make more money because you're no longer being stuck in the misery of that old program.
What's so interesting about that programming is it doesn't ever make logical sense. Like the
It
sort of
doesn't.
things that your subconscious
Nope.
tells you, like when you hear it out loud, you're just like, that's
Well,
crazy. And like
when
you
we're
become aware of
7,
it.
we're not even logical, right? When we're 7 years old, every thought we have isn't logical yet because the brain hasn't developed.
Right. Right. So someone could be going through this pattern and it could exhibit itself in so many different ways, like in these subtle self-sabotages, for instance.
100%. Yes. Or they're going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. They're going to have what I see as well as they're running the same pattern typically in their relationship and they don't know it.
Right. So
So
even the type of team members that you
yes,
attract.
they're going to attract team members that run the same, like the same neural pathway, which is the same trauma pattern. It's wild. Like you get a team and every team I work with, I'll be able to see in the executive team, oh, this is how they all sync up because they all have one aspect of the owner's trauma pattern. And the owner will attract team members that have that same, whether it's negative or positive aspect or trait. But nobody really recognizes it until you sit down and you show them the patterning and how it all works. And then
Oh, that's
sometimes
so interesting how that
they'll
goes
learn
through
and how they scale. Yep.
right, how that goes through an entire team. And we spend a lot of time on this podcast, talking about, team culture and how to build and motivate a great team and how to, create a diverse team, but align that on a mission and all of that. But like actually, you could work within an entire team and whoever the founder is has probably exasperated the problem by attracting a lot of mini-me's.
Yes. And that's what's tough, right? I used to go out and do a lot of leadership training for companies based on, I worked with the Navy SEALs for a bit and I backwards engineered the mindsets, the structures, the systems that help the Navy SEALs be some of the most elite performers in those high risk environments. Originally, when I started bringing that information out to executive teams, and what I found was you can train the entire team, but if that CEO doesn't identify the root trauma pattern, he or she will consistently jump in, micromanage, throw the team off, create chaos, and it will really stagnate the team's ability to grow more rapidly. And
Uh,
so that's where, I wish that only leadership training would have done it, but you really have to pair the leadership development with understanding the trauma pathways because that is the big game changer for all entrepreneurs.
Tell me about this transition that you made then, working in counterterrorism to deciding do this for, executives and entrepreneurs. What was
Well,
that kind of?
Melinda, you're going to laugh. I mean, it's so funny to look back at our lives and to watch how the path develops. But I mean, I basically was told, they're like, you have such a beautiful heart. Like, this is going to crush you if you go into this path more. And so they're like, you can't lie to save your life. Everything in your face is just, it tells us exactly who you are. So I was strongly encouraged by quite a few different people that were already in the CIA doing a lot of work in that front that they're like, you need to do something that is for the good of people and at a much higher level. So I really took that to heart.
You didn't have the CIA poker face.
Not at all. Nope, no CIA poker face. I love people so much. And I just think that it would have crushed my soul to have to lie or manipulate or manage people in a certain way. It just wouldn't have worked for who I am as a human being. So it was
Mm.
an easy transition. And the way I jumped from working for the Defense Intelligence Agency and with Booz Allen Hamilton as a defense contractor into working with a bunch of Navy SEALs who were basically being sent all across the country to prevent people from camcording movies in theaters. There used to be a really big problem with this where people would go in, steal the movie from the theater, and then on a blockbuster weekend release it and make millions of dollars overseas. And so I got to work with 30 to 40 different Navy SEALs who are all retired. And we would send them out on these little mini missions to find the guys that were camcording in theaters and then transfer them to the police so that these people could be picked up and arrested. But because I spent so much time with this wide variety of really unique beings, I started asking a ton of questions and trying to figure out, like, how do they think so differently? And when you just talked about motivating a team in a new way, what I discovered from the SEAL teams is that when they go to plan these elite missions, they aren't planning an elite mission based on strategy or tactics. They all start with, what is the emotionally successful future we all want to feel when this battle or this mission is complete? And then they build from that emotional successful future. And that blew my mind because I'm like, we're really doing it backwards with our teams. If we could start with the team focus on, okay, we got this huge project. What is the emotional feeling we all want to feel as we go through this process? And then at the end, that emotional feeling of us being successful, if we can use that to guide us, then everybody stays on task, stays focused, stays motivated at a much higher level. So that's an example of something that I took from the SEAL teams and I started training and coaching on that made a huge difference in the motivation of the team itself.
That's fascinating. I remember reading a book a while back called Stealing Fire. And
Mm.
it talked about how the SEAL teams gave examples of sports teams, business teams, but it actually talked about SEAL Team 6 and how they're able to sort of read each other's minds in like split seconds. Like, because there's no time on the spot to, like, if you have to think about what you're doing in a situation like that, it's like too late.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's interesting how the hive mind, I guess, got wired in a case of, say, an operation or a really risky operation SEAL Team 6 was on, for instance,
Hmm.
and how they would be able to function at that level.
I mean, SEAL Team 6 is just incredible. I've only had the opportunity to meet with a couple of those gentlemen, but the ones that I have met are next level in the way that they can sync up their brains, their bodies, their response times. It's a whole different level of elite.
Wings of Inspired Business is brought to you by the podcast Zero Limits Business Growth Secrets, where Steve Little, serial entrepreneur, investor, and mergers and acquisitions maestro, shares the little-known 24 value drivers that can spell the difference between a $5 million business or a $50 million business, even a $500 million business. It always pays to understand what's driving the underlying enterprise value of your business. So check out Zero Limits Business Growth Secrets at zerolimitsradio.com. That's zerolimitsradio.com and available wherever you get your podcasts. More information about valuation growth at zerolimitsventures.com. And we're back with Annie Yatch, executive coach and founder of Reinvention XO. So, Annie, what was it about your life, like, say, you as a 7-year-old, that led
Yes.
you here, if you don't mind sharing?
Of
I'm
course,
fascinated.
I'm totally hell. So for me, and this is, obviously I always say this because everyone worries about how their parents might, respond to this. I had wonderful parents. But when I was a little kid, my mom had three of us, three girls under the age of 5 and a dog that she was taking care of. My dad was working. And one of the things that happened was when I was a little kid, my mom would say, hey, help your sisters get their homework done. I'll be cooking dinner. And we were all in the same room doing this. But for some reason, as a little 7-year-old kid, I decided that meant that I had to take care of my sisters before I could have any fun. And my mom would always say, once you guys have your homework done, then we can go have fun before dinner. But before we knew it, it would be dinner time and we wouldn't have finished the homework completely. And so we wouldn't be able to have fun. And so what I designed in my cute little 7-year-old brain was I have to make sure everybody gets their work done first before I can ever have fun. And so what that looked like was me being extremely academically rigorous, helping everyone around me make sure they got great grades. I also got great grades, but it was like, how do we as a team perform at a higher level and get more done together? So I would not feel okay if somebody around me was struggling. I'm like, well, I've got to help that person get better so that we can all win together and then we can all play together and have more fun together. So that really drove my academic success, the way that I think my work ethic, how I help other people, how I try to support other people. But if you look at that's got a cap on it, right? You only have so many hours a day to help other people make their lives better. You really have to also focus on how do I make my life better? And so that was a pattern that followed me all the way until I had built 3 businesses with my ex-husband now. We had 2 little kids. We were bouncing back and forth between Florida and Park City, literally trying to do the best we could for all the people we were helping. And I realized I was miserable. I'm like, why am I so miserable? From the outside, everything looks amazing. Like most people are like, oh my God, you have the most amazing family, the most amazing businesses. But I was miserable because I had hit the ceiling of that pattern. And so I had to do the work with a coach of my own to figure out what that pattern was. And once I saw it, I could never unsee it. And then it became the journey of how do I make sure that pattern isn't driving my car? And I am actually, as an adult, driving the car myself with all of the learning and all the wisdom from all of the years. So that's just a little bit of the background for
Interesting.
me.
So you sort of grew up being a people pleaser in a way, right?
100% people
Right.
pleaser, helping everybody out, all the things. Yes.
And that's a very known pattern for women
Yes.
in particular.
100%.
And the pattern recognition of this podcast and almost 1,000 episodes at this point, where almost every successful female entrepreneur has had to overcome that some version of people pleasing or imposter syndrome, or the
Yep.
things that push us towards perfectionism, which
Hmm.
ends up being a block. It can come across in a business like you're serving your team, which is lovely, but getting, not holding your team accountable, say, or like
Hmm.
hiring people to do things, but not really being clear about what sort of results they should be delivering, or burning out.
Hmm.
So many female entrepreneurs burn out. So do you see certain patterns like that that almost every like woman entrepreneur or executive faces?
A hundred
Or are
percent. 100%.
they different than men for the most part,
You
or are there
know, there
some
are some
similarities?
similarities. There are definitely some similarities, but for most of the women that I've coached, it's an over masculinized version of themselves that they use in business to drive them
Right.
forward. And because they push themselves to be more masculine than they naturally or authentically are, the people pleaser, the imposter syndrome, the burnout, the inability to get out of that, I call it survival leadership. Most women are in survival leadership. They're not in true authority. And so if you look up, like, how do I get out of being a people pleaser? How do I get out of imposter syndrome? You see a couple of the same things. You'll see people say, well, you should talk to a therapist. You should be in gratitude. You should not people please, right? But there isn't a lot that goes into here's how we reprogram the subconscious so you don't do those things. And that's why for me, it was so important because I went through the people pleaser. I went through the imposter syndrome. I went through the burnout. I had to figure out how do I make sure other women never have to go through this once they identify the pattern. So that's the side for women. For a lot of men, what they end up doing is it's sometimes a self-worth issue. Specifically for men in real estate, I've found that they either grew up with a single mom or a hypercritical father. And what that caused was it caused them to doubt their own value, doubt their own worth, to create sort of a version of this oppressor versus the oppressed. They had to create oppressors in their lives so that they can fight against something to drive them forward. And I call this a negative fuel. So for a lot of men, there's a negative fuel from something in their past. For a lot of women, it goes into thinking they have to become this over masculinized version to be successful. And that drives them even deeper into people pleasing, imposter syndrome, and burnout. So it's a little bit different, but there is some overlap depending on, the person that I'm working with, but it is very custom.
Yeah, I mean, there's socialization around this too, where women in business have to fit or feel that they have to fit themselves into these male patterns. Men have been in business for a deal longer than women. It's not that long ago that women couldn't even have their own credit cards, couldn't even open a business or even
Wild. Yes.
buy right? So we're relatively new
Hmm.
um, to operating business. And you have all these structural issues like receiving still 30 years on, only 2% of the venture capital money. And so there's this pressure, or it feels like a pressure, to fit yourself into male structures. And so automatically, that's not authentic. So I sense that there's this moment in time right now where a lot of women are beginning to learn they can set the rules for themselves. They can run a business in a different way, or a way that's more authentic to them. Does that come up a lot for you as you help people through? I love what you called survivor leadership, as you help women, especially through that. Does it
Hmm.
change the way they even think about business or their business structure? The structure doesn't have to be as masculine. It doesn't have to be as linear. Mm.
Yes, it 100% changes how women think about business and how women think about themselves. Because if you think about it this way, if we're not engaging in business as our authentic selves, then we're not going to attract and magnetize towards us that which we deserve or that which we are available for, right? So for women who have had to it's almost like they put a shield up of their trauma pattern that prevents them from being in business as their authentic self. And men do the same thing. It's just a different shield based on if you're a woman or if you're a man. And then it's also a different shield based on, the background of experience you've had in your life. But the more women strive to gain access to that authentic self and to listen to that authentic self, the more revenue they generate in business. The hardest thing though for women is women fail to invest in themselves to do this deep work. It's the hardest thing to watch. Like men without even a thought will be like, you showed me something that I have a blind spot around. I need to fix this. What do we need to do to fix this? And women will be like, I don't know if I'm worth that amount of investment in myself, right? So it's harder sometimes for women to get to their authentic self because of some of those blocks that happen somewhat naturally from the experience women have had in business up until this point. So I
Right.
think you're right.
Yeah, that willingness to invest
Yes.
in yourself. Yeah, and it becomes kind of recursive, it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling thing. Like if you can't ask for and accept the help, then yeah,
But most women can't, right? Most women have been programmed and conditioned that asking for help is weakness, and men have been programmed with the same thing. So what I tell all the men and women I work with is I say, when you ask for help, you're actually allowing the other person to be on purpose in their life for you. So if you don't ask for help from someone else, you're taking away or stealing their purpose. And so it changed the game for me when I reflected on this, that we need to ask for help all the time from everyone around us. It's not about being weak or strong. It's about let's make sure everyone around us is more on purpose because then we all win.
right. That's an interesting thing, actually, because we feel sort of guilty, like we're taking something, but actually, in allowing someone to help us, we're, yeah, giving them the chance to fulfill their purpose. That really reframes it.
Yes. And there are these consistent reframes that, we've never heard of before. We've never been taught. Like in business, we've never been taught how to build an incredible business while also maintaining an incredible connected marriage. So that's one of the other things that I've noticed. We aren't trained to do these things. There's a lot of learning there. And one of the other things I care most about is when couples are working together in business, they're striving to create financial freedom and make millions together. But then the relationship starts to have cracks and issues merely because we've never been taught to build business and build relationship at the same time.
Right. Like this idea that, oh, you can't have it all, right?
Correct. You
Like
have
you're
to
asking for too
sacrifice
much.
in order to get to that next level of success. That's not actually accurate, right? You can build an amazing relationship that builds your business because there's more energy that's positive coming off of that relationship.
Right. Because there's a pattern also that you see with people. If they have a big success in business, suddenly they have an argument at home, or something's going well in their relationship, but then their business sort of fail. Like they, are beginning a great new relationship, but then suddenly their business starts to fail. Like it's sort of a preset thing within them that they think they can't have both.
Correct. Correct. And, everything we see out in the world is trying to prove to us that we can't have both, right? That success requires so much sacrifice. And so as entrepreneurs, we get in this sort of this lie, a subconscious lie that we have to suffer, we have to grind, we have to sacrifice in order to get somewhere. That's not necessarily true, right? But that's what we've been conditioned to believe.
Right. And the external world, of course, has a lot of influence on us. And I think right now, the anxiety that so many people generally are feeling just sort of about the world
Hmm.
generally. I mean, there's
Yes.
all this structural change with AI, but there's also like, this war going on and then tariffs and this and this impact. There's so much fear generally around. And so, how to operate at your peak when all that's going on around you? Does this come up in your work?
All the time. And that's why the HUNA work that I do is so helpful, right? I have some clients that once a week, they all get on a group call and we process out fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, any of these big emotions that they're experiencing because of how the world is. But what I try to remind people is your subconscious brain, because it processes 11 million data points a second, and your conscious brain only processes 40, we have to be so careful what inputs we put into the brain. So, just as a quick hack for anybody listening, if you really want to drop your anxiety level, what you do is you decrease the inputs. So, across all obviously social media and things like that, but you decrease the inputs and you allow your brain to wire by watching only comedy. So, we want comedy that you watch and internalize to reduce the impact of the inputs in the subconscious. So, if you ever want to, like, say you're in a moment of anxiety and you feel like there's fear coming in, you immediately watch comedy for an hour straight, and it completely helps to rewire and up level the neural pathways.
Right. So even if you feel like you should be an informed citizen about what's going on, just like watch a comedian talk about
Watch a
it
comedian
instead of
right after, right? Like you can be informed all day long, but you can control how you are informed. Right.
Right,
So
right.
there's got to be a structure and a process to controlling the inputs because, again, too many fear-based or negative inputs, and all of a sudden, what you would be making a decision on in business from a place of clarity and groundedness becomes a place of urgency and scarcity and fear. And that's actually the number one problem that I help people with in business when they work with me is how do we get you out of this fight or flight mode, this urgency, because it's a false urgency in decision making? And how do we make your decisions a lot more grounded and calm? Because if you make a decision from a place where you're grounded and you're calm, everything that is potential for that to take off works on your behalf. So there's a lot that I do to try to prevent people's brains from taking them in the wrong direction. And there's a lot that people can do that isn't, it's not a hard lift. It's not a heavy lift. I mean, if we watch comedy at night instead of something that's violence or drama filled, we're already rewiring the brain in a really beautiful way.
I think it'd be so interesting because if you look at the foundation of any business,
Mhm.
and I look back and just really with laser focused honesty in terms of any mistakes, say, characterize them that way in business, they've always been made when I was in a rush or I had that entrepreneurial false urgency.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I've got to get this position filled right away. And then you could make a bad hiring mistake or like this. And you're an entrepreneur. I mean, you're setting your
Yes.
own pace. Like, there's nobody else telling you when your app, the day your app has to launch or your,
Correct.
do
Correct.
you know what I mean?
But people
But,
create a lot of false urgency and they create a lot of competition, right? And so it's always, well, I'm not moving as fast as this person, or this person's doing something different than I'm doing, and now I have to switch. If we can be connected to this authentic voice that is within our heads, which is sometimes hard to find with all the noise in the world, we actually set ourselves up for massively different decision making. Especially if we have the right neurotransmitters and the right neurochemicals working in our brain for us. And that's sort of that last piece of this whole equation is we also have to boost our neurochemistry to give ourselves the best chance at coming at everything from a calm and grounded place.
right. So, Annie, how do people work with you and what's the investment to work with you? Say they're working with you for a year. How do all your programs work?
Well, typically each program is based on, the revenue that their company's generating, because I like to make sure that it's something that's sustainable for them, right? So we'll look at a 6-month or a 12-month program. But what I've started doing now, because so many people have asked me to open up something at a lower price point, is I have something called the Authority Shift, which is a 90-day live coaching experience that people can come in and we can release all of the emotions, all of the thought patterns in a 1 hour a week group session. It's a very small group session, so there's a lot of personalized attention, but that's a way that I can help more people at a time. And that is a $5,000 price point for the 90 days. But as an entrepreneur, that's, something you can write off in your business as a leadership development expense or a leadership training expense as well.
Right. And to work on, given that price point, to work on you one on one for a year is probably, significant. So I imagine you're working with people who are already, have pretty established business, not a startup founder scraping
Correct.
around for their investment.
Correct. It's usually entrepreneurs and, business owners that are making over $1 million a year. My sweet spot tends to be people that are at the 5 million to 20 million mark. Those are
Huh?
the people that I've helped the most over the years. But, I'm very open. I've worked with billionaires as well to reset their mindsets. I've worked with, I'm very passionate about working with women who are launching and starting their businesses to prevent a lot of the agony that comes from the first 5 to 10 years
Right.
in
That's kind of
business.
where I was going
Yes,
because I think there's a whole cadre. I mean,
there is.
as
Yes.
somebody who has, been in that whole startup grind from like, like idea for a transformational technology to getting it to market, trying to find money or investment or whatever, that's been my path. And you can get
Yes.
really stuck there where it's so hard to raise money, especially now. And if there was some way of repatterning that at that stage, but those folks don't have money because every cent that they have has gone into their business, right?
True. That's why I do a one call every month. That's just an open free call where anybody who wants to can jump on it. It's called the win the boardroom, win the bedroom call. And anyone who wants to can jump on. It's free. And I will help 10 people every time, whoever raises their hand first. to help, because I realize, right, sometimes you just don't have the funds, you don't have the ability to invest, but the most important investment is in yourself. So that's why I try to hit it at a couple of different price points for people.
Amazing. Well, I think the work you're doing is so important. And, you could maybe just take on the entire US government for us.
Oh my goodness, I
Do you
know, right?
mind?
Well, I think the reason why I haven't even remotely gone back to the world of government, right? Because that would have been what counterterrorism.
Right.
It's just the vibrational frequency of that work is so low in that space, and
Oh
I'm
gosh, yeah,
extremely
it sure
energetic.
is. I mean,
Yep.
you can just see the results of
hmm
that,
That's
right?
why I get so excited to help the entrepreneurs, because like entrepreneurs, so many of us are trying to make the world a better place. And if I could be part of one entrepreneur making a massive change in their relationship or their business that leads them to impact more people, that is the absolute best work I can do to support someone.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs have a lot more chance of actually doing that good work, as long as they don't go to the dark side. There's some
Right.
that are
There are some.
that aren't necessarily making the world a better place. But yes, this is amazing. So what's the best way, Annie, for people to find you and work, and work with you? Like whether they're, whether they have the cash on hand, right, to do the one-on-one, or they just want to get a little bit of your work with your Win the Boardroom group or whatever. What's the best way?
The best way is, you can send me a direct message through Instagram. My Instagram is reinventionxo.annie. That's a very easy way. I respond to all of my DMs personally. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of LinkedIn free trainings every single week. I typically do one that helps people get out of survival leadership and into more true authority. So you can find me there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for putting on your wings and flying with us
Oh
today.
my goodness, this was so beautiful. And I love everything that you do. So thank you for all the support you give to the community and for everything that you coach and teach. I really am thankful to be a part of it.
Annie Yatch is a transformational leadership and executive coach and the founder of Reinvention XO. Please give Wings a 5-star rating and share your reviews on Apple and Spotify. It helps more entrepreneurs like you find the secret sauce to support and grow their businesses. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. Head on over to wingspodcast.com and subscribe to the show. When you subscribe, you'll instantly get my special gift, the Wings Success Formula. Women innovating, networking, growing, scaling is the Wings of Inspired Business formula for daily success in your business and your life. Miss a Wings episode? We've got hundreds in the vault, all with actionable advice and epiphanies. Check them all out at melindawhitstock.com or wingspodcast.com. You can also catch me on LinkedIn or at Instagram at Melinda Ann Whitstock. We also love it when you share your feedback with a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen, including Podopolo, of course, where you can interact with me directly and share your favorite clips.